Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more trope talk, some more overly sarcastic productions. And this time, are we the baddies? Are we the bad guys? I don't think I've done this one before. I think I started watching this on my own time. It was before I was anyways, I'm going on a tangent. Completely unrelated tangent. It's unimportant. Anyways, my brain is a bit weird today, so you're gonna have to deal with it. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Okay, are we the baddies? Uh, this essentially is just like, it sometimes, I don't know, I feel like it ends up being like, uh, Red is of course going to twist this, or put a spin on this that's very positive and talk about the good examples and stuff. I can't really think of too many examples. This kind like what jumps out to me when I think of this trope is just like kind of the bad guys really realizing they're the bad guys, because like when we or it's the good guys temporarily thinking that they're the bad guys, but in reality they're not. That moral dubiousness doesn't truly exist within the story. Um, the only time where I feel like it actually really worked, this kind of trope, this kind of thinking, was in the Poppy War trilogy, where decisions on both like that. If you want a story that is really morally gray, like where you're like, I don't want to side with this guy for these reasons, but I don't want to side with them because they're for these reasons, you know? Um, and it's uh and essentially I think this trope fits the main character quite well. Um and really all the characters quite well. God, the Poppy War trilogy is so fucking good, dude. It is so traumatizing. um but aside from the Poppy War, I can't really think of any genuinely good examples of this that isn't just immediately undercut. Poppy War Trailer is the only one where it's not undercut that I can think of off the top of my mind. Let's dive in.
This video was sponsored by World Anvil, the perfect tool for broadening your horizons and questioning the moral character of your spiky pauldron boss. Far be it from me to generalize off an incomplete dataset unless it's Friday or I'm sleepy or the sun rose in the morning, but as a rule, most fiction is pretty upfront about who the good guys and bad guys are. Moral
Yeah.
gray areas and surprise twist villain reveals are the exception, not the rule. Characters will slyly glower for nobody's benefit but the camera just so the audience knows they can't be trusted. Musical stings and dialogue patterns will clue us in on who's dangerous and bad versus who's a quippy, fun-loving hero. In real life, you can't judge a book by its cover, but in fiction, that is what the cover is there for, and most stories will focus on showing a character's fundamental gimmick pretty quickly so the audience is familiar with them and knows what to expect going forward. And sometimes that means the bad guys are spooky baritones in long black capes and ominous face-concealing masks, while the heroes are a delightful cadre of beautiful young people with personal morals as pristine as their winning smiles. But sometimes that's just what the characters think is happening.
Are you the orphans enjoying the new playground? Yes, your vileness.
In some stories, the true morality of
Step 1, comfy status quo. Our hero is part of a system they think is A-okay in the morality department. They're earnest, enthusiastic, and optimistic, but the audiences has reason to suspect the system might not share their morals. Soon there will be order. Yay!
the situation
Aye.
is being purposefully obfuscated, typically reversed. The hero will be under the strong and heartfelt impression that their culture, society, organization, friend group, training facility, etc. are the go-getting paragon heroes, while their enemies are the nasty and corrupt minions of evil that must be morally opposed. But the audience is usually informed fairly quickly that all is not as it seems. Perhaps our hero's boss wears a suspiciously dark outfit, or the enemy leader is a beautiful young person, or the name of the hero's organization is something subtly ominous like the Empire or Kitten Squishers Incorporated. Whatever the specifics, the audience is clued in pretty.
Step 2, inciting disruption. Our hero's comfy black and white worldview is shaken by an outside influence that makes them question the world they know. With newfound perspective, our hero begins to notice some evil red flags. Your boss keeps burning towns down, but that's not orderly at all.
pretty quickly that our optimistic hero may be being misled, and typically early in the first act, right where you'd put the inciting incident in fact, the hero will become suspicious of the same. Somehow, something slips through. Maybe a suspiciously beautiful enemy agent who seems to be making some weirdly reasonable points, or a quick glimpse at the outside world calls into question the stories our hero's been told about the way things work, or the hero's boss calls everyone in for a PowerPoint presentation about how they're on track to become the first empire solely run on the renewable energy provided by orphan souls. Whatever the trigger, something causes our hero to question their hitherto ironclad black and white worldview. Something makes our hero wonder, are we the bad guys? Now, despite the villainy inherent in this reveal, this is actually a startlingly common
Okay,
heroic
so this isn't quite the take that I was thinking of, but it works.
origin story, and more startlingly, it almost always happens to total paragons. See, most evil empires and similar organizations are pretty unsubtle about their evil machinations at the top levels, but for the purposes of PR and maintaining order in the rank and file and stuff, they usually have a veneer of propaganda reframing the stuff they do as good, or at least necessary, or failing all of that, harmless fun. The Empire isn't evil, it's just keeping things organized. Everyone loves organization.
Rogue One, not Rogue One, Andor does this so well. Andor shows the propaganda of the Empire while also still making it very clear, like, you know, that, like, through the eyes of Cassian, that it's all propaganda. Like, Andor is just such a clever show. I fucking love that show.
So some people working for Kitten Squishers Incorporated can see the writing on the wall and know they're doing bad stuff and are tacitly on board with that, but this paradigm will also attract the kind of big-hearted paragons who are really excited to uphold the stated ideals Kitten Squishers Incorporated highlights in all their onboarding seminars. The danger, of course, is that these characters are very quick to pivot as soon as they learn what actually goes down at Kitten Squishers HQ, as they were taking all their propaganda at 100% face value rather than seeing things from a broader and potentially more nuanced perspective. Often all it takes is a field trip or a single conversation with a suspiciously beautiful rebel to show these guys the error of their ways, and suddenly they have a whole new black and white worldview to uncritically absorb. This trope is most frequently a way to add a little exciting spice to the evil empire heroic rebels stock narrative, since it lets you pull protagonists from both sides of the conflict without having to get all morally complicated in the process. But beyond the very basic black and white morality, this trope actually explores a very interesting space about propaganda and perspective. The heroes at the center of these stories often have extremely limited worldviews before their surprise revelation. Frequently, they've been raised their whole lives in this propagandistic environment and have zero access to competing perspectives or even anyone outside that environment. Often they have a mentor and/or
Avatar: The Last Airbender, I guess, did this really well, specifically with that episode of Aang being in the Fire Nation school. Because what that does is it shows us, right? It kind of, up until that point, there are perhaps really only a couple of people within the Fire Nation that we get the inclination are good-hearted on the inside, right? Zuko and Iroh. And then, of course, and the first firebender that Aang goes to learn firebending from is also, you know, a good person. Was the Fire Nation school before or after Sokka made his sword? His meteor sword. Can't remember. But the school, essentially what the school episode shows us, and what Avatar: The Last Airbender really needed to do, as just a way of showing more depth to the world, but also like more of the, you know, like, hey, Zuko and Iroh aren't the only ones, right? This is a systemic issue and not a the Fire Nation isn't just born, these guys just aren't largely born evil, you know? This is a systemic problem within the Fire Nation that needs to be done away with, right? And that's what the Fire Nation school episode did for the audience, is just show systemic problem.
or parental figure who's been guiding them as they grew, preparing them for greatness and a promotion to kitten squisher upper management. With a limited view of the world at large being actively curated by someone with power over them, it's no wonder that these characters have a completely circumstantial perspective on morality. The minute they're given brief, unfiltered access to the world outside that bubble, they start to realize how narrow their slice of reality really is. Often this drives these characters to take a more active interest in the sides of kitten squisher operations they don't normally deal with, to try and determine for the first time whether or not what they've been told is good is actually good. And because these characters are typically passionate paragons, as soon as they've seen enough, they usually bail very quickly to join the heroic rebels instead, often pursued by angry former bosses and mentors, and occasionally by other future heroes beginning to question their role in the kitten squisher corporate ladder. Now, there are a few key ingredients that make this trope what it is. As discussed, our hero must initially be lacking in perspective, so the revelation is suitably dramatic, but it's also important that they're not in charge. They're following someone's lead rather than determining their own life.
What she says there, yes, following someone else's lead, right? And that's what we get with Zuko right off the bat. He isn't really doing it. He's doing it because he wants his dad's love. That's the important factor. He isn't. It would be different if, say, he was already the Fire Lord and he's doing it to like prove himself to the Fire Nation, right? That wouldn't endear you to Zuko. But what they do within the first few episodes, was it within the first episode or the first two that we get the reveal of why Zuko has his scar? They reveal it pretty quickly, I believe, if I'm remembering right. And Iroh reveals it pretty quickly. And right, like that, Zuko's dynamic with his father is what keys us in on the fact that, hey, he's still good. He can be redeemed. Azula, on the other hand, takes a much more active role, however, right, which is why I think the audience has a harder time kind of seeing her as redeemable. I still think she could be. She just needs a lot of help.
Life trajectory, and their motivation
gonna
typically
go
aligns
somewhere
with
with it,
whatever
but I
their
forgot
boss's
where I
stated
was gonna go.
motivation is. Helping people, bringing order, saving the world, something equally vague and generally positive, but their boss's actual motivation is just something that can be dressed up pretty to look like that stated motivation. World domination, for instance, does all three of those things from a certain point of view, but our hero is typically much less on board with that. This disconnect between their boss's true motivation and their own motivation is what causes the schism once they realize they're not actually on the same page. If, in contrast, the character is in total control over their own life and is making all their own choices for all their own reasons, and then realizes what they're doing makes them the baddie, this is a rather different trope that usually kicks off a villain redemption arc for them, unless they immediately die or something, which also happens a lot. More on that later. Actually, that's a risk for all the characters in this category, as villains will often default to killing minions who stop being useful, and defecting from Team Bad Guy after reading the fine print on the user agreement is a pretty definitive stopping being useful. Recently enlightened heroes trying to break away from Kitten Squishers Incorporated might find themselves having to fight their way out through former bosses and coworkers, and non-protagonist minions that figure out their bosses are actually evil are often immediately killed by said boss just to prove how evil they are. It is also important that these characters have some sort of code. It doesn't have to be a specifically moral code, they just need some kind of personal standard, a line that they just don't want to cross. Kitten Squishers Incorporated's
Red has a thing with kittens this episode.
positive facade tends to slip when a minion doesn't immediately follow orders, and a character being pushed to do something that completely crosses their personal line is often a pretty revelatory moment for a hero who's hitherto only seen the fluffy positive side of Kitten Squishers marketing. It's pretty common for these characters to have a chill, casual, no-killing policy they might be encouraged to sidestep for the greater good, or the character might see their bosses or coworkers doing something they consider personally super dishonorable, like sacrificing their allies or torturing their enemies or dabbling in evil sorcery or whatever. Whatever it is, it's not what they signed up for, and it makes them start to reconsider their loyalty to Kitten Squishers Incorporated's brand. In fact, this can lead to our intrepid protagonists getting themselves into very
Boss, some of the co-workers were being super evil.
serious trouble very quickly if they assume, perhaps reasonably, that the bad stuff they just witnessed that made them question their entire worldview must be happening without the knowledge and consent of their beloved boss, who they love and trust and would certainly never condone any sort of nastiness on account of how dedicated to world peace they are. Thus, it makes perfect sense for our Paragon POV character to march up to their trusted mentor and tell them all about these terrible kitten mulching rumors they've heard about, and they can't possibly be true, can they? While, of course, from the boss's perspective, their most enthusiastic and talented evil minion just marched up and said, "Hey boss, are we evil? Because if you give me an answer I don't like, I might fight you about it." Which is the sort of thing an evil emperor might reasonably be expected to respond to with, say, stabbing, or a dungeon, or ominously asking if they told anyone about this before coming while slowly reaching for the trapdoor button under their desk. Paragon heroes are often also very trusting, which is usually why evil bosses like them so much, but it can make the process of defection a lot less fun for the hero than if they'd had the wherewithal to be sneaky about their investigative process. This trope also comes with a lot of fun accessories, mostly from the evil former friend line. As a formerly loyal Kitten Squisher employee, our newly rebellious hero will have plenty of friends and allies back at KSHQ who are probably reacting to their defection in all sorts of exciting ways. Some may feel personally betrayed that their buddy chose a moral code over hanging out with them more. Others may choose their loyalty to their friend over their place in the company and defect right along with them. If the hero has an evil mentor of some kind, they can very easily become the main villain's right-hand bad guy, the evil lancer that has an actual...
I just gotta say, I gotta take a moment here. We got season 3 of Avatar: The Last Airbender is just perfection. It's just all the build up from the first 2 seasons with the relationships of all these characters interconnecting and things. And then, May and Ty Lee betraying Azula the day of Black Sun invasion. Oh, chef's kiss of a season 3.
personal connection to the protagonist rather than just an ideological one. In other cases, the evil mentor is the boss, and a formerly parental relationship becomes a full-blown arch-nemesis situation. An evil former bestie can also get promoted to main villain status this way. On the flip side, though, a hero's former mentor might turn out to have actually been a secret good guy the whole time, who was rooting for them to defect and subtly encouraging their more heroic impulses. Our hero might also find kindred spirits in other former Kitten Squisher employees who defected earlier and acquire some nice tasty validation that they're not alone in their unorthodox career trajectory. Plus, this is an easy conflict driver among the protagonists, as heroic rebels can be expected to be justifiably suspicious of this shiny new defector from the bad guys no matter how earnest and heroic they appear. Now, this is definitely the stock way for this trope to play out, but there's plenty of room for variation. For one thing, sometimes the character is less of a 100% paragon and is a little more okay with doing stuff they think is morally iffy. This can slow down the side-switching process significantly, as even if their horizons broaden, they might have a personal priority they think is more important than doing what they're beginning to think would actually be good. Similarly, sometimes a character will only realize they're one of the baddies when they're actively mid-atrocity and have already done some really terrible things, and this will kick off a personal arc about trying to atone for what they did, rather than immediately pivoting to team unproblematic faves without issue. This is a much less common backstory for main heroes because it produces characters with very complex moral pasts who might be better slated for emotionally fraught redemption arcs than for wacky fun protagonist adventures. These characters also might consider themselves fundamentally irredeemable, and instead of trying to seek some kind of personal unproblematic ending, will focus on trying to make up for the damage they did by making the world a better place overall, often by going out of their way to stop anyone else trying to do the same thing, or to more broadly make it so it can't happen again. While this backstory is fairly uncommon for main characters, it's actually surprisingly common for mentors, who are allowed to have more morally complex characters because of their complex and varied pasts, and also typically being more than 2 decades old. These characters maybe were full-blown villains in their youth, but had some form of personal revelation about their badness and pivoted to uncomplicated heroism to support the new generation of heroes and keep them from making the same mistakes. And, as briefly mentioned before, sometimes full-blown main villains will have this sort of realization, usually very close to the end of the story and right before either dying or being redeemed, but not always. Sometimes when a character realizes they're the bad guy, instead of flipping to be more heroic, this actually causes them to double down. There's something liberating about concluding you're an irredeemable monster. It lets you do all the things you think an irredeemable monster would do without feeling any worse than you already do. While some villains will recognize the scope of their own evil in a sudden crushing moment of personal revelation and immediately remove themselves from the story about it, other villains will finally get the memo that they're the main villains and decide to start owning it, sacrificing whatever pretenses or personal codes they were worried about back when they were still the hero of their own story. This is bad in a lot of ways, as it usually leads to the newly enthused villain stacking up a lot of really bad stuff on their ledger very quickly with no regard to actual moral impact, and if this character is supposed to get a redemption arc somewhere down the line, this can make that whole process a lot harder to sell. But even if this villain is just a villain and there's no redemption arc on the horizon, this this still usually leads to a significant escalation in villainy and the corresponding damage done by it. A villain who previously had a personal code or a not particularly evil life goal has now concluded that the actions they formerly thought were justifiable or heroic were actually evil, and instead of ratcheting back on the evil, they've decided to crank it up. As a side note, this can make the bad guy both more dangerous and less interesting, as instead of having a complex motivation or an intriguingly skewed worldview that casts their own terribleness as misunderstood heroism, they're just evil out of a sense of obligation to stay consistent. Pure evil can be a joy to watch, but these guys are
I wouldn't say that necessarily. It both does and does not apply to Anakin. That's the thing that's so frustrating about trying to uh when you know looking on Anakin as a character in his transition to Darth Vader. It's both yes and no with that, because like you have to buy the internal reasoning of Anakin truly believes that the only way to save Padme is by following Palpatine, especially now that, Mace Windu is dead. Anakin in that moment is like, that's my right. Like Anakin's defense of Palpatine is like, hey, he is bad, but you told me, right, us Jedi aren't supposed to do this, which is hypocritical of Anakin, because Anakin is very much, when you go through the Clone Wars series, you see him willing to end someone quickly, if he believes it to save the greater amount of lives, right? Like we see this when during part of the Mandalore arc, when some bad guy has his hands on a button that like blows something up, and Obi-Wan is not willing to kill him. Obi-Wan is trying to figure some way out to end it like peacefully without death. Anakin just drops in, stabs him in the back, and saves the day, right? He stops the guy from blowing shit up. But, that shows a bit of hypocrisy that he's willing to do that, but he isn't willing to let Mace Windu do the same. Palpatine, because Anakin believes Palpatine may be the only way to save his wife, his secret wife. And of course, hypocrisy does also help make really good characters. It's just also like you have to watch so much of Star Wars and also kind of read deep, kind of somewhat deep into the line. You have to like pay a lot of attention. You have to pay a bit of attention to it. Right? You can't just watch to really get the full story, right? You gotta watch the Clone Wars. That's several seasons. That's 7 seasons of TV. So like, the movies could have done better at showcasing Anakin's internal conflict, but yeah.
Usually kind of bad at it because they're demonstrably not particularly self-aware, considering how long it took them to figure out they were the bad guy, and a pure evil villain is at their most fun when they're both self-aware and gleeful about their evilness. There's a hint of angstiness about these villains that can make them interesting in their own way, but also almost frustrating. A villain who realizes they're the villain and then decides to villain even harder is so close to figuring out what might actually be good for them, but as a general rule, the mindset of I am an irredeemable monster whose best hope is to burn the world down right along with me is not healthy. Pure evil villains who are fully self-aware the whole time often seem to be remarkably well-adjusted and are thoroughly loving life. Evil not out of obligation, but because of their passion for the field. But these villains turned worse villains are usually visibly spiraling in a very self-destructive way, digging themselves deeper because they saw they'd already dug themselves into a hole and concluded the only way to go from there was further down. It can be quite painful to watch, and the audience might want them to try the self-awareness thing one more time just to realize that doing all this is bad for them actually.
What's funny is my D&D character is in that self-deprecating spiral, and it's so fun to play. It's so fun to explore. He's not a villain. He's trying to be good. He's he's never been a villain. He's trying to be better, but like it's also like hard to dig yourself when you go into spirals like that, right? It is exceptionally difficult. So it's just so fun, and also it's just so fun to explore a character just spiraling worse and worse and worse. But of course, you gotta balance it for like the story the DM is telling, and the enjoyment of your fellow players. Um, so yeah, but also I kind of just want to play a new character. I came up with a new character, and I'm like, damn, I really want to play this character. So can we get rid of my current guy so I can switch?
Actually. And this can be a very interesting character for an author to explore. Villains motivated by spite and self-loathing are a lot spicier than villains motivated by malice and the joys of crime doing, and often engender audience sympathy even while they're at their absolute worst, as the audience roots for them to knock it off and maybe take a nap or something. They can be kind of tough to narratively handle after their enshittening arcs, though, as a lot of audiences tend to write these guys off as fully irredeemable shortly after they start doing bad stuff on purpose, and often don't take too kindly to these characters doing anything other than getting worse and or dying. But personally, I can't be mad at any story that says it's never too late to stop digging. If redemption arcs are only for characters who haven't really done anything too bad, they're not really redemption arcs. They're self-indulgent angst arcs. An arc
Yeah.
that gets resolved by somebody hugging the character and saying, hey, it's okay, it wasn't all that bad anyway, doesn't really give any character who actually does anything really bad any opportunity to ever be better. Exploring a character who gains perspective, realizes they were doing bad stuff, and then handles that revelation extremely poorly can be very interesting. Just look at the 500,000 think pieces on why Zuko is the coolest, including the one you're watching right now. On some level, this trope is all about how one handles the realization that they've unknowingly caused harm. Some will immediately pivot to the new thing they think is right with
And one thing that I think we ignore though, is Iroh's own redemption arc. Iroh goes through a redemption arc. It is subtle, and of course, in some people's eyes, maybe the creators of the show, the writers, did not do enough to emphasize, like, yo, Iroh did some fucked up things in the past that he needs to atone for. Um, my personal belief, I think they handled Iroh well enough because the focus is on the young characters of the show, and not on characters like Iroh. Um, though of course it would still be nice to get more in depth, but like, right, Iroh was formerly the heir to the Fire Nation. He was the top general. He besieged Ba Sing Se. He did some fucked up things in the past. He was a military general of an occupying colonial imperialist force. But his own redemption arc is Zuko. Zuko is part of his redemption, his personal redemption, and I think it fits Iroh's story and arc that his redemption does not take the center stage. He's there in the background, like he's not like actively doing anything, or well, front and center doing anything that's like, hey, I did fucked up things and I'm working on apologizing for it. He doesn't bring attention to it. He never once talks about it. He's like, right, he helps free Ba Sing Se later on. But also through Zuko, you could argue that through Zuko, through educating Zuko, through being there for Zuko, that Zuko and who Zuko becomes is Iroh's redemption to apologize for the mistakes of his past, right? And now this may not have been the intent, but that is how I read into Iroh's character, and I see a personal redemption arc for Iroh, in all of that, and I think it works really fucking well. I think it's so phenomenally done. As long, I hope it wasn't. If it wasn't intentional, if it was intentional, then that's just fantastic, right? That's just genius writing. If it wasn't intentional, then they get a then they accidentally did something really cool. Um, yeah,
wavering confidence and defend it just as enthusiastically as they did the bad stuff. Others will stick with the bad stuff for some personal reason, a sense of duty or obligation, or a bone-deep desire to protect someone else just as mired in it. Some will fall for the sunk cost fallacy and double down on the badness, weighing themselves down with a newfound sense of irredeemability and an almost liberating
yeah,
sense that now they have no choice but to be terrible because it's too late for them to be anything else. Others will turn and take a stand against the system they've hitherto
and also, right, Anakin is. There's so much going on with Anakin that it kind of does go against. It does end up working, I think, a bit against Anakin because there's so much there for Anakin. right? It both works for and against Anakin, I think, sometimes. Um, because there's just so much reasoning going on, right? The sunk cost fallacy, the belief that, well, to save Padme, right, I've got to be with Palpatine. Whereas before, he wanted to become a Jedi Master because he knows that there are holocrons that only Jedi Masters can unlock that perhaps would have allowed him to save Padme, right? And then once Mace Windu's gone, that essentially goes out the window, and the only thing he's left with is got to stick with Palps. Um, and then like the daddy issues Anakin has, the mommy issues because, well, the Jedi Order, didn't. It's one thing that it's kind of something that I wish some Star Wars writer would address because George Lucas never addressed it. Is like why did even like Qui-Gon Jinn understood the situation, and I believe understood what Anakin needed. Anakin kind of needed a father figure in his life. He needed someone else, like, other than his mother. He needed, but also, like, I think Qui-Gon was like why leave his mother in slavery? The Jedi could have like bought her too and like moved her somewhere safe or like something like it's just frustrating because they just God, someone needs to explain why the like I mean, I guess the Jedi just don't do it because they're like, well, he's got to move on. But it's also like he can't move on if the mother he grew up with, from right because he's a bit old to be a Jedi when he's accepted in. Um, he's at the point where like he's already attached to her. You've got to help. Got to do something about that, right? Ah, it's a little bit it feels perhaps a maybe something forgotten by George Lucas to address or whatever, or like I don't know. It's just Shmi always comes off as a bit of a miss to me in the prequels because of how she is handled and how what the story tells us of the Jedi and what they're supposed to be like. But then we see with Shmi and Anakin that they're just not like that, right? Like someone would have I feel like someone would have helped. Either either Qui-Gon would have helped before he died, or Padme would have helped because Padme liked Shmi. Padme, especially when we look at Padme in like the Clone Wars series as well, what we see with Padme is like she would have helped. She may have only been like 14 in episode 1, but she still would have done something. Like maybe have made Shmi one of her handmaidens or fucking something. That's when you think about Shmi, kind of things fall apart for me.
They're too served even if they know it'll go very badly for them, because the principle of the thing is more important than their own well-being. Unsurprisingly, in fiction as in reality, the question, how should we act when we realize we've done something bad, is a complicated one with a lot of different answers, and it is very rich in drama. So, yeah. Thanks again to Will.
And that was Trope Talk, Are We the Baddies? I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.